but annoying Mr. Putin, I don't bother about that. I mean, he has been annoying us for years.
Former head of the French military mission to the UN and NATO and a former defence advisor to Emmanuel Macron. Dominique, we've been talking today, welcome by the way, we've been talking today about military chiefs from around 30 countries meeting in London to discuss the logistics of peacekeeping in Ukraine. It's been called a reassurance force if there are to be boots on the ground there as part of a peace plan for the country. What progress do you expect to hear about, to make today?
I think that this meeting is coming after the meeting last week in Paris, where the CDS met and were already having a political input and saying what their country was ready to make. And this meeting today is a planning meeting a job that I've done as a planning officer, saying what are the different schemes for this force, willing if we've got option 1, 2, 3, who will put something on the table for these options, a brigade, so many aircraft, so many...
What do you make of the idea of a peacekeeping force?
I think the main objective is just to show that the Europeans are here to help and concretely help Ukraine. This is important for the US to understand that the Europeans are taking the burden. This is important from Moscow, showing that Ukraine is not alone and that we are helping. The way we are helping will vary upon who will be able to provide troops, aircraft, or so many pieces of equipment. But the important thing is to show that we are preparing. We can't wait to have an agreement and then to prepare. We've got to prepare before and to be ready if there is an agreement.
Okay, fail to prepare, prepare to fail, goes the famous phrase, of course. The problem with a reassurance force or a peacekeeping force, however you want to term it, is that this is a red line for the Kremlin, for Vladimir Putin so far. In no uncertain terms, he is not a fan of this happening. If the UK and other European nations, other Western nations go ahead and do it anyway, we risk the ire of Vladimir Putin, don't we? Should we do it regardless of what Vladimir Putin says?
First, why should Mr. Putin decide for an independent country, which is Ukraine, which want to be supported by European country? That's the first bit. Second thing, for 3 years and more than that, I think that Putin has been strong because we have been weak. And we need to be strong to show him that we have the will to do what is useful for Ukraine.
So even if Vladimir Putin says no, we should go ahead anyway. Would that not risk just annoying him and perhaps causing, the war to restart if there's a ceasefire at that point? I mean, how do we deal with that? Because the last thing we want to do is inflict any more pain on Ukraine or indeed any other border country.
Of course, but annoying Mr. Putin, I don't bother about that. I mean, he has been annoying us for years and we have done nothing. So we need to be willing to do something. Then the second point is the decision of Ukraine. I think that currently Ukraine is not able to reconquer the ground which has been lost and which is occupied by the Russian. So if there is a ceasefire on this line, okay, we'll stop there. We'll not fight to reconquer with Ukraine. But we will provide a force, say, I don't know, either in Poland or in Ukraine, in Lviv, Kiev, Odessa, just to show that we are here and that the next time when Putin wants to do something, we'll be there.
And what should be the scope of any force, any boots on the ground? If Russia fire, do we fire back? The strength of this force, this is really the planning cell currently doing the job. I will not do the job at their place. But what would be wise, do you think, in your experience?
I think that we are looking at Russian force more able than they are. After 3 years of war, they have been only able to take 17% of Ukraine. They are occupying less ground than they were occupying in September 2022. And
only
so,
marginally
marginally
less.
That's okay.
And there is the assumption is that Putin will agree to no ceasefire until Kursk, which is a Russian area currently occupied in a very small way now by Ukraine.
Kursk, it's lost. I mean, Kursk was the willing of Mr. Zelensky to have a money in the end before discussing.
Yeah.
Apparently, the Russians have put all their best troops there. They are retaking Kursk, and there will be no discussion about Kursk.
So a fifth of Ukraine's territory is now occupied by Russia.
Yeah, and that's the point. Will Ukraine say, okay, I've lost this piece of ground? I just remind them very often of the French history. You have lost Alsace-Lorraine for 50 years, and now Alsace-Lorraine is French. So they must think about that. The demography of Ukraine is in very bad shape. So they can't, they are not mobilizing people between 18 and 25 for good reasons. Because if they mobilize these people, they will kill the young people for the future of Ukraine. The future of Ukraine is not at war, is at peace and looking at Europe. And that is what's wandering Putin.
There are plans being discussed to draft younger Ukrainians in, which is not popular in the country for the reasons that you've explained. We understand that Emmanuel Macron's happy to follow Keir Starmer in committing troops to the ground as part of a reassurance or a peacekeeping force. What would it take to get other countries to agree to this? Why do you think other European nations have been so shy to make that same bold commitment?
Because the first point is that for 30 years, all European countries have been disarming. They've got very small army, very, very small capacity, and they have to rebuild that. In France, we are lucky because since 2017, we had an increase of budget, an increase of the capacity. Not sufficient, but it was something. So really the problem for all European countries, what are we able to do now? Italian, Spanish are very weak. They are not able to provide many things. The Germans...
So are the UK, by the way. Our defence spending has consistently gone down. We've committed to more now, as Macron has done. But in the short term, that's not going to provide a peacekeeping force. So why haven't other European countries done what the UK's done then? We've got depleted armed forces, but this is a priority.
Yes. This is a priority. Many decisions are taken because we are just looking at the war in the East. We should look at what's happening in the West and Mr. Trump. And so suddenly all European countries realize that perhaps the Americans will not be with them inside NATO and inside Europe. So that's why they are suddenly waking up.
But they're not waking up so much as to commit any troops, are they? Italy are shy.
But because that's a
Spain
short term.
the same.
Be careful. That's a short term. They don't have the troops currently.
We don't have the troops here in the UK either, really.
But if they wake up, it's to be ready to defend Europe with European means in 4 or 5 years' time. So the planning cell today is what are you able to do today? And when we are talking about that, France, I know, is probably ready to put a brigade. It's probably the only force. Really, the Germans are not ready, very far away. The Poland will be ready, but in fact they don't want their scaling.
Well, they already share a border.
Yeah,
with,
not really.
Well,
not with Russia, with Ukraine and with Belarus.
Yeah, their argument is that their troops are busy enough, effectively.
Yeah, that's an argument. Of course, if you push forward 400 kilometers, you will be busy there. I will not discuss. I mean, all nations have national interest, and Poland have a long history with Ukraine.
Yeah.
Difficult, so that's probably what. And they've got election in May and June, so they
the problem
is,
if it's only the UK and France who have committed so far, and we don't think we're going to get commitment from many other countries, that's not much of a peacekeeping force, is it?
It depends on what you do in peacekeeping force. You know, if you are just observer, you don't need many troops. If you are a reassurance force, you need air force mainly, not troops. We're always talking about boots on the ground, but the air force and navy is very important. So really, I don't want to make the job of the planning officer who are meeting in London. Yeah, we'll see in 2 weeks' time, 3 weeks' time, what they will put on the table and say we are able to do that or to do that. But what is very important is not to wait a probable agreement.
Yeah.
We don't know when. We've got to plan now.
Should this involve some sort of backstop, some sort of security guarantee from the United States? You'd mentioned air cover, and that is something that the United States have that actually European nations don't have a lot of.
Yeah.
Do you think that that should be conditional? Do we try and push that point forward to President Trump that we do need US cover on this?
Of course, we need to do that because on the short term, we are not able to replace what the Americans are doing. So we've got to ask, and be careful, but the fact that we are European trying to build a sort of European defense to defense Europe doesn't mean that we don't want the American.
Well, it just
it's
depends.
the American who make the decision.
Well, it is, yes, yeah. What do you make of the way that Donald Trump's handling this? He's not given anyone security guarantees. He seems to be saying to Ukraine, now the mineral deal's almost been put to one side. Well, we'll put US people in your power plants and that will provide cover. I mean, one thing Donald Trump has not done is really gone anywhere to any sort of commitment on security guarantees. Is that just bearing in mind how much European nations are working on this now? Maybe they have been remiss in the past, but bearing in mind the focus, the bi-weekly meetings on this, should we expect a little more support from Donald Trump to that point?
Certainly, but it is very difficult. He started the negotiation by providing all what Mr. Putin wanted. So it's very difficult to discuss when you've already provided everything. And we saw in the last phone call between Putin and Trump that, in fact, it was a failure for Mr. Trump. And he wants to have an agreement very quickly. He will not have an agreement very quickly because Putin knows that he's very strong. He's weak. He wants to have an agreement very quickly at any cost. I've got time. I will take my time. And we are discussing about not only the ground that we are occupying, but Novorossiya. Novorossiya go to Odessa. They never have been able, with military terms, to take Odessa, but they want to have that by negotiation. So I think that Mr. Trump must realize that at a certain point is showing his weakness. That's why he had a phone call with Mr. Zelensky yesterday, and he said, I will provide you more Patriot in Europe. We'll see that. Mr. Zelensky is going to Paris next week. Everything is going very, very quickly.
You think Donald Trump's realised he's in a position of weakness and he's clawing something back from Ukraine and other European nations?
I think that the next meeting in Saudi Arabia will show that how many cards he's got in his head, in his hand. The only point for him will be to be stronger. But we don't know how far Mr. Trump is in the hand of Mr. Putin. And that is difficult.
And that's a concern, isn't it?
Yeah, of course, it's a big concern for us. That's why France has said for years that we must be more powerful. That doesn't mean that we don't want to be with the US, but we don't have to ask every 4 years what will be the result of the election in US. Will they protect us or not? We need to be autonomous, to be ready without them, but we prefer to be with them.
In just a few words, who is the better Trump whisperer? Macron or Starmer?
No, I don't think.
Which one has dealt with him better?
No, I think he has a personal relation with Mr. Macron, with the President Macron. Fine. Doesn't change anything. With the Prime Minister, UK Prime Minister, I think roughly nothing. You know, the spatial relationship is a dream. I mean, it's only useful for US when they want it, but it's just a dream. I'm quoting a British minister, by the way.
Okay, so by that answer, you would tell me that the relationship between President Trump and Macron has more substance to it.
Substance, I don't know. when they meet
Authenticity?
together, they are like boyfriends, like in a school, a boyfriend.
The French are the experts at romance, Dominic. I don't know about that. Just finally, let's talk about this EU defence fund. The British arms industry is being blocked from contributing to it, and it turns out that in order to get a slice of this EU defence fund, for them to buy British weapons, we'd need to sign a deal. We'd need to sign a deal with the European Commission. And part of that deal involves fishing rights, which is something the French are after. So all of this over a bit of fish. What do you make of all this?
I think that the European, after Brexit, a bit before, but after the Brexit, are wondering if UK and in arm equipment is not the back door of US. And we must be careful about that. We've got no problem with Franco-British companies, MBDA, Airbus. We've got no problem with that. But the company who are only British, we don't know what's the link with the US. And that's the wondering. About the fish, clearly I don't know. It's probably, fishing.
So is that actually true?
Yeah.
That this security pact with Brussels, if Keir Starmer signs it, he has to then commit to certain fishing rights with France?
I've not heard about that.
Okay.
I heard about a signature of an agreement which is compulsory because UK is not part of Europe.
Yeah.
That's the choice of the British people.
But you're also saying it comes down to distrust of purely British defensive companies,
Yes.
because you're concerned that they may have links or connections with the United States.
Yes, exactly. Remember, before Brexit,
Why is that a problem, though, if they've got links to the United States?
Because, for example, before Brexit, the British always block any European capacity in military terms. Always. That's where we are now. They always, a planning cell in Brussels was impossible because we've got NATO. Having a conduct and headquarter, impossible because there is NATO. They block all the time. As soon as there was Brexit, we had a planning cell in Brussels. We had an headquarter in Brussels.
I see. So it's a bit of get your own back, isn't it?
No, the problem is the autonomy of Europe. And we see now that all European countries are looking and said, well, we didn't thought that the US will be like they are. I say, okay, we told you for years that we need to be autonomous, to be ready to do things without the US, even if we want to do them with them. But we must be able. And that's the only point. And as I said, the US decided not to help us. And currently, they are even speaking of secure, the commander in NATO could be someone else than an American. That's a sign that they are living. And we must be ready to do that.
Okay.
If they stay, we are fine with that.